Choice Cuts by Rob Smith. Manna called, said she was staying with her mother an extra week. Steve was all alone, and he was his own cook. He ate steak. After practice, Matt noted, "Hey, you're really buffing up. What's going on?" "Well, I'm getting ready for the season. I gotta make bigger. Gotta gain my max weight." "Yeah, that's how they pay the big contracts," Matt joked. "By the pound." "Hells yeah, brother." "No, but seriously, you're really puffing up. Are you juicing?" Steve laughed. No. He looked around the locker room to see if they were alone, and confided, "No, I'm on this, special Atkins diet. All meat." Matt raised an eyebrow. "You may doubt me, but it's the best thing I ever did for my body." "Oh, what meat are you eating?" "Steak. The best damn steak I ever tasted. One of my fans dropped it off for me." Matt's eyes lit up. "No shit. I'm a steak lover. Want to hook a brother up?" Steve patted his hoodie's belly region. "Sorry, bud. It's all in here now." Matt awed in disappointment, and they walked up the security hallway to the players' parking lot, making chats. But truth be told, Steve had 10 steaks in his freezer. He could have hooked Matt up generously, but he could not bring himself to part with a scrap, not a morsel, of that scrumptious mystery flesh. And it wasn't the flavor, although that was mouthgasmic. It was the dreams he got from each meal. Since consuming Richard's steaks, he was having vivid dreams from which he woke up feeling smarter, like he had lived someone else's life for a night, someone with depthless experience and intelligence. Maybe all this meat protein was building up the connections in his brain. The next week, he started to feel bloated and ill. Steve drove himself to Allegheny Hospital. A CAT scan was arranged for the same day, and some sonography. The doctor on staff, a young black guy about his age, spoke to him after the imaging was completed. "You're having a bowel obstruction. For right now, we can treat it with stool softeners, and I'll give you directions on what you'll need to perform an enema at home, but this could have been really serious. Whatever you're eating, you gotta cut it out. Lay off the beef, bro. Get some veggies in you." But the doctor might as well have asked him to stop breathing oxygen. As soon as he got out of the hospital, he headed for his car, where he had cold slices of steak waiting for him in an icy red cooler. Steve had a dream, a proper one in bed. In his dream, Richard was standing inside a barbecue. He was standing on the grills barefoot, and the soles of his feet were sizzling. As if that wasn't bad enough, Richard was holding a hatchet in his right hand. Gleefully, he raised his other arm, the one with the Khmer tattoo, and lopped it off at the elbow. Arterial blood jetted red and vivid from the stump. With a laugh, Richard picked up his lost limb and slathered it with barbecue sauce. He dropped it on the grill, the skin and fat hissing, and black smoky plumes of aroma wafted up. Steve thought he woke up screaming, but actually, he woke up drooling. They didn't last long, that package of 10 steaks. Across the lawn he went again, this time feeling his blubber jiggling on his belly, his tits. A little out of breath, he rapped on Richard's glass patio door. A woman came to the door. Well, woman was a generous word to use. A skeleton with skin, small tits, and long hair came to the door, smiled, and ushered Steve inside. "I'm Mimi," the skeleton rasped. "Right. Richard's wife. Nice to meet you. I'm Steve." Mimi smiled, all unnaturally long teeth. "I know who you are. We don't miss a Steelers game here." He laughed, trying not to recoil, as she led him by the arm in through the kitchen into the TV area. Richard was watching football. He smiled and waved. He was still wearing that blanket over the area where his legs should be, and now he had pulled the blanket up over his left shoulder.
"Guess what? I can't get you that steak anymore. Season's over."
Steve visibly wilted against the wall.
"But my Jew butcher friend's got something else, even more delicious."
Richard used a remote to turn off the TV, and, one-handed, rotated his wheelchair to face Steve straight on. He had a look of glee dancing in his eyes. That dream again. And he announced with great theater,
"Have you ever heard of the cannibal tribes of Papua New Guinea?"
"Nah, I don't go in for that sick shit," Steve muttered, wondering where this conversation was going.
"They have a meat that gives them skill in battle, so they say. And now I've got some of it too."
As if on cue, Mimi reached into the freezer and pulled out a black plastic bag. Something was in it. Richard continued,
"It's a hand. They eat the hands of their enemies."
Steve didn't know if he should vomit, run, or ask for the recipe. The look was easy to read on his face, and Richard laughed.
I don't have a human hand here, dummy. That would be illegal. No, I've got monkey hand. It's from a silverback gorilla in New Guinea. It's cured in exotic spices that will blow your mind, and the locals swear this bushmeat will bring you accuracy when you throw things, be that spears or, say, footballs. And I believe you're aiming for QB this season, aren't you, Steve?
Steve nodded. How does it taste? Richard looked coy.
You tell me later. I only have the one I can give you, for now.
Taking the black plastic bag and a plate of cookies from Mimi, Steve went back across the grass and straight towards the barbecue, drooling in anticipation. At the dinner table, he was in conflict with himself. Revulsion versus appetite. It's a human hand. Using a knife, he dug out the fingernails. It doesn't look like a gorilla hand. He slurped the meat off the first digit. What are you, a zookeeper? He snapped off the first knuckle. How many gorillas have you seen? And tongued the tendons off the bone like pink spaghetti. There was no fur. It had pink skin. He slurped the meat off the thumb. It fell apart, soft and tender. So they scalded the fur off the hand, like they do when boiling pigs. He ripped savagely with his canines at the pads of the fat fingers. And some gorillas probably have white skin. He spread the middle and ring fingers apart to chew into the webbing. What about the mark on the ring finger? He tore into the palm, luxuriating in the fresh pink meat at its core. That was a wedding ring mark. The palm muscles, like fat fibrous flower petals, flowed down his throat unchewed. Nonsense! He snatched up a knife to crack open the bones in the palm. Even the marrow was exquisite. Besides, it's all gone now, he burped. You have no proof, so just lick your plate and shut up. I want another one. Even though Richard had told him he only had the one gorilla hand, Mimi was standing at the patio door, as if she knew he'd be back all along. She smiled another ancient smile, and asked him how it was. He couldn't answer, only licked his lips. Where's Richard? She smiled demurely. He wasn't feeling well, so he went to lay down. He said you'd be looking for this. It turns out we had another one after all. She handed him another black plastic bag with something inside it. Steve took it and left. He didn't go into the house this time, so he didn't get an opportunity to see the blood on the kitchen counter, the bloody cleaver resting on the cutting board. The dreams were vivid and inexplicable, running through a muddy trench while rockets and grenades exploded overhead, rot-smelling mud sucking at his boots, riding a camel into a gun battle somewhere in the African desert, hearing the whoop and cry of black-turbaned guerrilla fighters at his back, running through a lush rain forest, a feathered wooden spear with a flint rock tip, sniffing for prey. By this point, Steve wasn't going to practice anymore. He wasn't talking to Mana on the phone. He wasn't bathing, dressing properly, or drinking water. All he was doing was cooking and eating meat from Richard's house. Even when he didn't think he could fit another piece of steak into his swollen belly, his legs would walk him over to the house across the yard to see what new offerings there were for consumption. Eventually, he stopped making the trek altogether and just stayed at Richard's, while the phone rang and rang over at his own house. Mimi gave him a little lobster bib to wear so he wouldn't get grease on his t-shirt. The shirt was sodden with grease already, but it was a nice gesture anyhow. She sat him down at her dinner table and brought out strip after strip of long beef, she called it. She would fry it on the stove, a horrible relic, probably never having been cleaned, or glaze it with honey and spices in the oven. Scarcely had she finished with its preparation than Steve would be on top of the dish, jaws working furiously, trying to swallow what hadn't even been chewed. Then he slumped in the kitchen seat and dreamed, and marveled at the complexity of life, the intricacy of the web of connection that keeps us all alive. Sometimes he fell asleep into pleasureful dreams while meat was still in his mouth. He would wake up just in time to see another steaming plate set before him. Was it him? Or did this cut of beef look like gluteus maximus? Ass cheeks. Was it his imagination? Or did this cut of beef look like triceps? And these were definitely guts, although Mimi called the dish tripe. Mimi grew to be like a grandmother to him. While cooking, she would explain some of the spices involved in the dishes. Other times, she would tell apparently fantastical stories about how Richard and she studied black magic for years, how they both existed throughout the ages, cheating death. "It's rebirth time. Him first, then me," she confided cryptically as Steve slurped a soup of what was possibly beef penis and testicles. He emptied the bowl. After she served him a steak with a nipple on it, they looked each other in the eye, and all pretenses were abandoned. From that point on, the meat was clearly seen coming out of Richard's bedroom. She'd go in with rubber tubing and a bowl of water, a knife or a cleaver, and come out after some minutes with a fresh strip of long steak. Steve didn't care. Keep it coming, he thought. At some point, he heard Richard's voice from the bedroom asking Mimi to check how things were going. She approached Steve's left arm with a sharp paring knife, and before he could protest, sliced a 5-inch gash across the deltoid. He felt no pain, and watched disconnectedly as she pried the skin apart with her old, withered fingers. Under the layer of skin was the stuff you'd expect to see, a layer of fat and blood vessels, but then under that, another layer of skin. Weird, Steve thought, not very concerned. He was mollified by the meat he was munching, so like a cud-chewing cow, he contentedly allowed Mimi to continue her examinations. She used the paring knife to dig out and clear more space, and there, clearly visible under Steve's skin, was a foreign layer of skin, well-defined muscles, and a blue tattoo, the Khmer eternal life symbols. Later on, she fed him a heart. At first he thought it made his pulse race and his heart beat faster, but he was wrong. His heart was beating just fine and at a regular tempo, lub-dub, lub-dub. What he was hearing was a second heartbeat, keeping time with it. Steve wasn't Steve anymore. Well, his body didn't belong to him anymore. The body would get up and walk around, and he would go along for the ride. It did things he couldn't explain or understand, like drawing pentagrams and symbols on the floor, and then crouching there, lighting candles. It would take him into the basement to fetch books off a bookshelf, hoary old books written in strange languages. Down in the basement there were other things too, things the police should know about, like little cadavers dressed in schoolgirl uniforms. But he wasn't in charge of anything anymore, so he just chewed his meat and watched silently. He watched with fascination as his hands held a piece of paper entitled Last Will and Testament of Richard Down. There were details about the steps to occur in the event of his disappearance. Details laying out how Richard Down was giving all his property to Steve Green, his only friend. Steve watched as his own hand signed and dated the document, but wrote the name Richard R. Down. They even put in the strange loop in the R and the heavy dot over the I. Finally, he woke up from a dream to find himself standing in front of Richard's bed, a red-stained mattress slathered with blood and gore, and in this mess lay a flesh-stripped skeleton with Richard's head still attached. The head of Richard was singing a song. It took a few minutes for Steve to catch the joke contained within. "I've got you under my skin," by Frank Sinatra.
I hope you saved room for the final course, Steve. Some pink jello we call me. Once you finish it all, you will no longer be you. You will be me.
"And then it's my turn," Meanie added, excited. What did that mean? Steve's eyes still belonged to him. They flared furiously, impotently.
Bye-bye, neighbor. It's been a slice.
Richard winked once at Mimi, a signal for her to proceed. She produced a whining surgical bone saw and set it to the top of his skull, slicing a circular pattern through the skin. The bone smoked and the blood cooked on the hot saw blade, and Steve's former stomach grumbled. This last meal wasn't like the others, all sumptuous and ephemeral, with visions and delectable aromas. When the old man's brain died, the glamour surrounding the meat died as well, and all was revealed as it was. Steve was repulsed by the sight of Richard's raw brains. Mimi grabbed Steve's struggling head and force-fed him hot, iron-reeking cranial meat. Its oozing consistency had the texture of rotten oysters, and that just made him all the more revolted. The cerebral fluid smelled like candle wax, and as she forced spoonful after spoonful into his mouth, he gagged. She clamped her surprisingly strong mitt of bones over his mouth and nose, forcing him to swallow in order to breathe. She popped Richard's eye out with a spoon and fed it to Steve the same way, clamping his nose and pushing it down his throat. When he started to vomit, she forced him to hold that in too. not wasting a drop. He swallowed, vomited, swallowed. His vision began blacking out, and he understood why. His eyes no longer belonged to him, and Richard would see through them from now on.
You bitch!
Steve choked, stomach acid leaking from his lips.
You fucking bitch! This has been your trap all along.
She grinned, showing only a few teeth remaining. And you stumbled right in, greedy guts. She went back to scooping Richard's brain pan clean, getting all of it into a bowl. But you know what I'm gonna look forward to most? She asked him, acting all sweet.
Going to hell?
Ah, the classic Steve wit. When I become your wife, Lana. Steve raged and struggled against his supernatural bonds.
Keep your bony hands off Mana.
The old woman waved offhanded. Whatever. She reached around for the bowl and spoon and positioned herself in front of him, vulture-like. She pinched his nostrils shut and pushed the spoon brimming with brains into his mouth. Now open up. Here comes the train. Choo-choo. On time like clockwork, Matt pulled into Steve's driveway in his Porsche, ready to go to practice. He was surprised to get Steve's call to come pick him up, but he was happy for the company as well. Cruising solo in a babe magnet is a little depressing. Matt got out of his car and knocked on the front door and then entered. Inside the home, it smelled awesome, like Christmas cooking and Thanksgiving cooking had a delicious baby. Wow, man, what's grilling? Steve turned around to regard him, a new invigorated look in his eye. Clearly the 2 weeks off had been good for him. He'd cleaned up, the place was clean, and he was already losing all that fat. He even had a different look to his face. His chin was defined, clefted where it hadn't been before. He must have had some plastic work done, too. Mana's coming home today, and I'm cooking her a welcome home gift. I know she's going to be ravenous after all that travel. Matt nodded and looked around. Well, what did you make for her? A meat pie? The old lady across the way gave me a great recipe. I thought you said Mana's a vegetarian. Oh. Well, one taste of this. She'll come around.